Right. Design a file system with Python. The problem is to create a file system with the following functions. A function that takes a file path as input and inserts it into a certain location based on your path. It must create directory objects and file objects. You enter the text you want to insert into this file as well as input. Function to traverse a given directory and list all directories and files in that directory. Function to take two inputs, the file and a directory, which is optional. The function checks if the file exists in the dictionary. If no directory is mentioned, then search in the root. Import the OS module in Python. Create a class file with three functions. So there's an init function, which is the constructor. There is write and there is read. So for a file, what are the two things that you need to do? You need to write and read. And for that object, you need an initializer as well. Directory, we have init, create, and list files. So that's it. That's the two things that we need in a directory. In a file system, we need init, which should be able to initialize the root directory. Um, a create file function to create a new file in the file system, create a directory to create a new directory in the file system, list files, which takes on a directory path to list all files in a directory, insert file, which will. What's the difference between insert file and create file is something I need to understand. Okay, yeah. So create file creates that file, just creates that file, and insert file inserts that file into a particular directory that you can pass in. Cool. View directory will list the contents of a specific directory. Cool. Okay, so let's look at this in detail. So class file def underscore underscore init underscore underscore self comma path colon self dot path is equal to path initializing the objects variables to path def right, which also is a function which is related to the class as object. So for each object that you create, this like you can call this function for a specific object. Now with open self dot path in write mode, with open self dot path, which is our directory path in the write mode, as f dot write data. That's it. Now for the read function, def read, which takes in an argument self. So with open self dot path in the read mode as f, return f dot read. Pretty simple. Now coming to the directory class. So this is the init function which initializes self dot path as path. There is a create function which so it's like def create self. Again, an object, a function which is related to an object. Now, this function os.make dirs, very important. You need to give it a path to create a directory. It'll create like an empty directory. And exist token equal to true. It's like it'll like if it exists, then it'll create it. If it exists, it'll not create it. That's it. Now, def list files of self. What does exist okay equal to do? What does exist okay equal to true do in Python? I'm just quickly searching in the background. If you said exist okay equal to true, you can specify an existing directory without encountering an error. Okay, so if it already exists, then it is not going to throw the error. It's going to just like let it be, right? Otherwise, it would have thrown an error if it had already existed. Um, def list files self files is equal to an empty list it looks like, and then for dir path, so directory path, directory names, and file names in os.walk self.path. So the format is directory path. Okay, let's think of it. Directory path, directory names, and file names in os.walk self.path. For file name in file names, files.append, os.path.join, dir path, comma file name. This is something that I'd like to see actually in action, how this works out. How does os.walk work? Let's ask ChatGPT. I'm gonna ask ChatGPT. Let's how does os.path work? In Python, os.path is a module that provides a way of using operating system dependent functionality, such as working with file paths. However, it's worth noting that in Python 3.4 and newer versions, the pathlib module is recommended for path manipulations as it provides a more object-oriented approach to working with paths. That being said, os.path module contains several functions for working with file paths. Some of them are os.path.join, where is used to join one or more paths and components intelligently. Okay, sorry, os.walk. That's what I wanted to see. I think I mistakenly searched path. The os.walk function is a convenient way to iterate over all files and subdirectories in a directory tree. It generates the file names in a directory tree by walking in either top-down or bottom-up through the directory tree. For each directory in the tree, it yields tuple containing that directory path, a list of subdirectories, and a list of file names. Here's a simple example of how to use os.walk. Root directory, this is the root directory. Okay, so for current directory, subdirectories, and files in os.walk root directory, in current directory, subdirectories, and files. So why is there a for? Why is there a loop in here is what my question is. What is this? I think I should, try to execute this sometime. But for now, we'll just keep going. So os.path basically gives you directory path, directory names, and file names in order. So it's like easy to remember. Create file system. It has an initialization function root. There's a create file function which creates a new file object and writes some empty anything to it. You can also pass in some data to this. Create directory takes in the input path, creates a directory, new directory of by initializing the path, by passing in the path, and then calls directory.create so that it creates that path. List files. So basically, it's a very important thing that you first create that object with a certain thing and then call a function of that object to take care of everything else, to create that directory. Yeah. List files, directory is equal to directory of path, return directory dot list files of this, creates a new object and just calls list files on that directory. Again, it's a good one. Like this is a good way of doing it. Insert file, so there's a directory path which comes in from the file path. This is a function os.path.dir name which is getting used, which just gets the directory name. Then create a new object with that directory path. Now create that directory. Now create a new file with the file path and write some data into it. View directory listing contents of a directory path, files, self.list underscore files, path for file path and files, print file path. What does list files do? It gives you all the files of that directory, right? And for file path, you just keep printing it. Yeah, that works. You can try executing this to see how that works. So os.makeDirs creates directories, access token flag checks and creates directories only if it doesn't exist already. os.walks function gets all the directories and files inside a given directory path. To test this application, create a new file system example and execute it from the terminal. Search functionality. So along with all of this, we wanted to have a search functionality with a file name and the target directory, which can also be empty. So if the target directory is not none, that it exists, then create a new directory object with that target directory path. And then found files is equal to directory.search file. So we've added a search file in this directory. So again, we do a os.walk on the path of the directory, and if the file name matches, then we append the found file. And if we come back here, so if found files is directory of search file, and found files in if there is no directory, then we go to the root and search everything. So for directory path, directory names, and file names in os.voxel.root.path. For f in file names, for if f is equal to file name, then we append it to the path. So in this case, we use the root to start with and return found files. So that's it. If there was any found files there, that's it. And otherwise, yeah. So in this updated implementation, that's what we did. Okay, cool. So that's it. Thanks for watching.